So in this video I'm going to be going over the overhead brake and the straight in approach. We'll be doing a couple of touch and goes and a full stop landing. This is part of the basic fighter qualification in the GTF 13 squadron that I'm a part of, and I teach the F16 as well. So what we're going to be going over today is the first little section of the BFQ. I already covered the startup in the previous video. This one we're going to be doing taxi and takeoff, which I'm already right at the runway. And we're going to do an overhead brake to a touch and go, a straight in to a touch and go, and then a closed pull up to a full stop. Which basically means I'm going to do an overhead brake, do a touch and go out away from the airport again, do a straight in landing, don't do an overhead brake or pattern or anything like that, just go straight into the runway. And then after I do a touch and go there, I will be pulling straight into the downwind and going to a full stop landing. These are fairly basic procedures, but things that are crucial to be able to effectively do in order to easily fly the F16 and do so in a safe manner. So it's always important to check the runway, make sure there's no incoming aircraft or anything, as well as a lot of times when you're playing multiplayer you'll be doing radio calls over SRS, telling people that you're taking the runway, communicating what you're doing. It's really important to make sure that you don't cause any accidents at the airport. Or anywhere, really. Alright, I'm going to be going ahead and taking off here. Just checking my joystick's good, running up to 80%, and I'm happy and satisfied, so I'm going to go ahead and take off. I'm going to go in burner because that's what I normally do. Start rotating, probably around 140. Rotate, off the ground, gear up, radar altimeter on. Out of burner because I have no ordnance or anything on here, so I will accelerate very, very quickly. Turn up the brightness on my screens here. And runway we're going to be operating off is out of Nellis. We're going to be coming in at runway 21 left. So basically I'm going to give myself enough distance from the airport to be able to comfortably maneuver and get turned around. Once I turn around and I'm coming into the airport for the overhead, I'm going to be shooting for 350 knots and 1500 above ground level. Alright, that should be good. We'll slow her down here and get turned around. And it's important for these things that you get lined up so the runway is straight on with you. Anything off kilter is going to just throw off your landing. So wait until we see that real nice and straight. Turn it in. And trying to get that runway looking as straight as possible. I'm going to bring down the speed to get myself in line with 350 knots. That is the overhead speed, runway pattern, overhead speed that we run at GTF 13. I believe the manual officially calls for 300, but we run 350 just to make sure that we are consistent with all our fast movers. Alright, bring the altitude down a little bit. You can check the radar altimeter on the right side here. Best practice is to either utilize the radar altimeter or check the actual airfield elevation. Alright, so right at 350, right at 1500. And Generally you brake about midfield, but it kind of depends on the runway and if you have any wingmen or anything like that. So I'm just about midfield, so I'm going to bring my throttle back. I'm going to pull around 2 to 3 Gs consistent. Once I get below 350, while I'm putting out my air brakes, once I get below 300, I'm going to put my gear down. Gear's coming down. I'm going to try to maintain a level attitude through this entire turn. My gear is down. I'm going to start adding throttle, maintaining 200 knots in the downwind, and right here I'm going to roll out. I am fairly reciprocal heading. You can kind of just adjust based on how your profile is. Generally you want to make sure that your AMRAM or the wingtip is not any closer than overlapping with the runway. So we're pretty good there. So what I'm going to do now is wait until I get about a 45-degree angle from the runway. And when I'm satisfied with that, I'm going to go ahead and roll in towards the runway, bring my throttle back, and dip my nose down to around between 2.5 and 5 degrees, and adjusting that as I need to, just kind of playing it by eye. Getting a little bit lower than I wanted to, and generally you want to be rolling about 30 degrees of bank to your left to line up with the runway properly. So bringing it around, I'm going to bring my speed back just a little bit more. And we can see we're bringing that runway in nice. You want to make sure you're lined up just like you were for the initial overhead brake. I'm going to roll out a little bit here as I'm coming in a little bit too tight towards the runway. Bring my nose back up. You want to hit this dashed line on the HUD. That's your 2.5 degree glide slope that you want. You can see we're a tad bit low, so we're going to bring it up. We're going to come right a little bit to get our alignment good. Adjusting my speed to ensure that we are within that bracket just to the left of the flight path marker. So as we can see here, I'm coming in right around the 2.5 degrees. I'm a little high. I'm just trying to maintain so I get to the end of the runway. Now I'm going to bring it back down. We're going to bring my speed back. As we're getting in close here, I'm going to roll my throttle all the way back and bring the nose up. And we're just going to kind of coast. I'm going to bring my speed brakes back in and put my throttle up. I'm not going to go into mill and take back off. We're airborne, gears back up, air brake is in, and gears fully up. So I'm going to accelerate out of here, and then we are going to go ahead and loop back around the runway and come straight in. The straight in is more of a test to ensure that you understand the sight picture that you're looking for to get on Glideslope, and you understand how to come in for things like when you have an emergency landing, when you're damaged, whether you have issues with ordnance or anything like that. And as well as if you're doing a IFR landing using the ILS system, or you're being vectored in towards the runway in a low cloud layer. The important thing to do for this straight-in approach is you want to make sure you have plenty of room to get yourself lined up as straight as possible, similar to what we did with the overhead brake and our final turn, getting lined up with the runway as straight as possible. So, probably got enough room here. Now I'm gonna bring the speed back, get turned around to the runway. Alright. Try to level ourselves with the runway. Bring the nose back in. And we're a fair bit high. Again, we're going to be shooting for that 2.5 degree glide slope. I'm going to level myself off here and get myself straightened up with the runway, and I'm also going to drop altitude to try to get myself on that 2.5 degree glide slope. So we're getting fairly straight on. I'm going to roll back in. I'm going to keep dropping altitude. I'm going to roll my air brakes out to slow myself down so I can put my gear down. Here we are straight on with the runway. Alright, speed brakes are full out. You should be able to hear them. Keeping my nose down still, we're still a little high. And as we slow down here, we'll drop speed fairly quickly as soon as we get below 300 and we can drop the gear. Alright, gear coming down. And there's our 2.5 degree glide slope. See, we're still fairly fast. We got 3 greens. We're good to come in for a landing here. We're just going to keep managing our flight path marker to keep it at that 2.5 degrees. And letting our speed drop down to bring that bracket in line with our flight path marker. Go ahead and I'll add a little throttle. Alright, that's the sight picture we want. That flight path marker right around that 2.5 degrees. Right in that velocity bracket for landing. Here we come. Just keep trying to maintain this as much as possible. Keep yourself as straight as possible. And just try to fly that 2.5 degree glide slope. Now as we're coming in close here, getting close, we're going to bring the nose up, drop that throttle, just float slowly towards the runway. And now speed brakes in, throttle back up, and take back off. Bring the gear up, and we're going to go right into a closed pull-up. Alright, we're right back into the downwind. We're going to drop our speed brakes, get a little bit more altitude so we're at 1500, and drop our gear. Give ourselves a little bit more spacing from the runway. As you can see, we're a little close. Dial that speed back just a touch. We're about a little high, but that's alright. You don't have to be absolutely perfect. A little fast, adjusting that speed back down. Watching for that 45 degree angle, right on 1500, 200. And then 45 degrees, so we're going to do the same thing we did on the first one. Drop our nose down about 45 degrees, dial that throttle back. Shooting for that 30 degree angle of bank. And adjusting everything as we come around to just ensure our lineup with the runway. Alright, looking good. Start bringing that nose back up, give it a little bit more power so we don't get too slow and fall out of the sky. Coming around, coming around. Glide slope looks good. Bringing our nose back up to that 2.5 degrees, keeping our speed up just to make sure that we got plenty of energy in case we need to make adjustments. And now that we're lining up here, start to dial the throttle back, bring our speed back down in line, get our nose down to that 2.5 degrees, and adjusting our nose as we roll that throttle back. Alright, and adjusting. Right in line, similar to the last one. Bring that nose back up just a hair. Just a hair. Go. Trying to stay centered. And rolling back that throttle, bringing the nose up. Holding ourselves off the runway as much as we can. And then now that we're touchdown, we're going to hold our nose up here. Aerobrake nice and good. Our brakes in the 16 aren't great, so it's going to take a while for us to stop, and aerobraking is the best way to do that. Holding that nose up as long as possible. As soon as it drops, engaging our toe brakes and pulling our speed brake out as much as possible. I'm slow enough now that I want to engage my nose wheel steering. Keeping our tail up and nice and slow here. And that is all you got. Go ahead and taxi off the runway. And that's our 3 landings.